Pastor David Youth has invited us here. We're so honored to be with you today. My wife Sarah and I have been married since 1973, 46 years, and we are honored to be with you. Have you ever had a conflict with your spouse or a family member when you're having this conversation, when suddenly the issue didn't seem to be the issue, and you saw their spirit deflate? I like to ask the question, what is the issue when the issue isn't the issue? I mean, you're having this conversation, and it's a real issue, but suddenly you sense it's not the root issue. That they're bothered by something, and they deflate, or there's a provocation. Something, you realize that whatever the topic is, there's something else now going on. And what is that? Have you ever thought about what that is? What is the issue when the issue isn't the issue? And what's interesting is that when the spirit of our spouse deflates, usually they're bothered by something that doesn't bother us. And so at that moment, there's a tendency for us, one, to be clueless, but we kind of feel they're being childish because whatever was said, it certainly didn't bother you, so why should they be bothered? But not only do we feel that they may be a little childish, come on, oh, brother, what did I say now? We have that moment, right? But they are actually offended by us. They're actually holding us responsible for what just happened. And we're in disbelief because, one, we don't even know what's going on. But now we're responsible for whatever it is that just happened in them. And we're in disbelief. Have you ever had a moment like that? Yeah. Yeah. Your husband's not here today with you, is he? Yeah. I mean, we all go through this. Sarah and I go through this at various moments. Well, so the question then again is, what is the issue when the issue isn't the issue? I'm going to share with you it's one thing. Now, I know that sounds simplistic, and thus I must be a simpleton. So I'm not going to ask you to buy into it. Let's see if I can persuade you. The onus is on me to try to convince you. So give me a little resistance. Because obviously, right from the get-go, we're going to say, oh, come on. Our relationship's complex. It's complex. It's complex. That's the kind of the standard little, it's complex. We have issues. It's complex. Well, could be. But maybe not. And I say that not to be dismissive of the seriousness of the issues that are before you, but I happen to believe that this one thing, if we get this, can really be encouraging because it also explains why it is that some relationships end, because we're not tracking with this. So there's one thing. One thing. Well, I have to put a caveat in right from the beginning. There's one thing in her and one thing in him, but they're not the same. And this is what makes for heated fellowship. One thing in her, one thing in him. So, for instance, suppose it's January 15th, and she says, I feel fat, I feel ugly, I have nothing to wear. From all those Thanksgiving meals, the Christmas parties, the New Year's celebration, I put on 15 pounds. I just feel so ugly. So he listens. Next day he goes to the Christian bookstore, and the lead book is Dieting for Today's Christian Woman. What? What? It's written by a woman. He brings it home and gives it to her, and for a brief moment he thinks he's at Cape Canaveral. She goes ballistic. And she screams through her pink megaphone into his blue hearing aids, you men have two brains, one's lost and the other's out looking for it. She calls him a brainless idiot. Why? Why? Because of that one thing that I'm talking about. Now here's what's interesting. He can have a 40-pound spread in the front, 40-pound spread in the back. He's a big boy now, and she brings home a diet book to him, and what does he do? Hey, thanks, what's for dinner? Why doesn't he go ballistic? Or here's something interesting. Her BFF comes over with a diet book and gives it to her. Oh, you bought this diet book for me? You're so sweet. Hey, should we do this together? What's with this? Well, part of it's rooted in body image research. I've got my PhD in family studies, and so part of what you see is that body image is huge. Now, there are exceptions to everything we say. Think bell curve, but it's statistically significant that women are very concerned about body image issues more than men are. There are men out there who are primping themselves all the time, but that's more of an anomaly. It's on the sides of the bell curve. And there are women who could care less what they look like. So there's an exception to everything that we say here. But when you look at statistically significant things, you're saying the results or the findings are not the result of randomness or chance. They're patterns, not to stereotype people, but to understand them. And so when you buy that diet book for your wife, she has a vulnerability where you don't. I mean, when they've done research on women who are perfect 10s, but when they look at themselves in a floor-length mirror, they see all their flaws. Our 40-pound spread boy in the front and back, what does he see when he looks at himself in a floor-length mirror? He sees Atlas. He can bring Atlas out anytime he wants. He just doesn't want to right now. But he knows there's a six-pack in there. It's true. It's true. So when you hand her a diet book and her spirit deflates, she hears a message, and it has very little to do with weight loss. When she hands you a diet book, you don't hear a message because you're not vulnerable where she is. She deflates in areas where she's vulnerable. And unfortunately, she hears messages a lot of times that we're not intending to send. This is why we think she's so childish. And why in the world would you be offended when you're complaining to me about your weight loss? Just trying to be helpful. See if I ever buy you a diet book again. And this leads to some serious, serious hurts in relationships. You talk about misunderstandings among people of goodwill. There's not ill will here. There's not evil intent. Actually, he's trying to be helpful. But this blows up in his face. And she's crushed. Why? Because she hears a message. And I'll explain to you what that message is. And it's not the same message that he hears. He just doesn't hear it. But let's go several days down the week, and she goes to that Christian bookstore, and the lead book is The Key to Marital Bliss, Communication. And she buys this marriage book. This is the third marriage book she's purchased for the two of them to read in the last 12 months. Number 3. So she comes home, she devours it from cover to cover. She said, he needs to read this. But he's been busy. He doesn't have time to read it from cover to cover, so I'm going to highlight in yellow some of the key sections for him to read. Then she puts it on the stand next to the recliner that he reclines in when he watches SportsCenter. So when he comes home, he sees the book there. Oh, brother. Oh, another marriage book. Oh, good. The first 2 marriage books she bought and we talked about, I got in trouble. If I bring up anything about in the marriage, I get in trouble. This time I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to ignore it because I'll get in less trouble. I know why she... Good grief. I don't know why the publishers just don't publish them in yellow. Why is he just shut down? Because he hears a message. He hears a message. And it's a message that she's not intending to send any more than he's intending to send the message through the diet book. Very rarely is he intending to send a message. But she hears a message, and she's not intending to send the message that he hears through the third marriage book. Very rarely. But he hears it, and he shuts down, deflates, ignores the book. And what's interesting is if he bought her a marriage book, number 3, that becomes bragging rights among her girlfriends. She'll be on the phone. He bought a marriage book. No, I did not tell him to buy it. I did not even hint. I wasn't even thinking about it. Why did he buy it? We're connecting. We're soulmates. She's energized by this. It's bragging rights. What's going on with this? Why is he indifferent to a diet book? Why is she energized by the third marriage book? Why does she completely deflate over the diet book? Why does he completely shut down on the third marriage book? Jesus said in Matthew 19:4, have you not read? He made them from the beginning, made them male and female. Didn't say human and human. There's an XXXY chromosome. You're here because of the sperm and the egg. You would not be here if it wasn't for male and female. You have to have ovaries, you have to have eggs. That's science. It's just not going to change. And you're here because of that. The question on the table is this: because we're equal, are we the same? No. One of the most foolish conclusions as a culture we could draw is that because we're equal, therefore we're the same. We're not the same. We have a crossover, oh yes. But these distinctions are just sufficient enough to irritate us and to annoy us. Because she filters the world through pink, so to speak. He filters it through blue. Now, the beautiful thing is that's a word picture. When you put pink and blue together, it creates purple, the color of royalty, the color of God. Husband and wife together reflect the image of God. And if you're not married, the gift of celibacy is given to those who can fully devote themselves to the Lord, but that's what we call a compensatory grace and gift to allow them to reflect the image of God as a single person. If you don't have that gift, Paul's very clear, marriage is God's will for you, and together, pink and blue reflect purple. Together, we reflect his nature, his image. It's a powerful, powerful thing. That's why I use the pink and blue. But God made us male and female, and there's just enough difference there that it creates annoyance. In fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:28, if you marry, you have not sinned, but you will have trouble. And this trouble is not outside of the will of God, it's within his will. He intended it, iron to sharpen iron. There's a place for healthy tension because it leads to a greater wisdom and a greater maturity. But we didn't sign up for that because we signed up for Hollywood, not the Holy Word. We have a 99% expectation of how that marriage ought to be good when God said it's kind of going to be an 80-20. And so what happens when you have a 99% expectation, you have an 80% reality, that 19% discrepancy embitters you and disillusions you. And then what happens, that 20% ends up being a little leaven that leavens the 80%, and now we're not even friendly with each other. We don't like each other. And here's the difference. There are pink and blue differences in the gray area that we escalate to black and white matters. And they're not black and white matters. These are not thus saith the Lord issues. So we have gray area conflicts. Should we send the kids to Christian school or private school, homeschool, secular school? These are not moral issues. Immoralities can happen in those areas, but that decision, there's no thus saith the Lord, send your kid only to a secular school. Should we move to New York or California? Should in Texas? These are gray area issues that God gives us a ton of freedom in. In Romans 14, some could eat meat, some couldn't. Some worship on this day, some on that day. Paul says, quit passing judgment on each other with contempt. Neither one of you are wrong, you're just different. Not wrong, just different. Not wrong, just different. Not wrong, just different. But what happens when my spouse is not the same as me? I've concluded, therefore, because we're equal, they should be. I know I'm normal. I know I'm right. Therefore, they're wrong. They're abnormal. And this becomes the mindset of the relationship. And we're passing judgment on each other with contempt. And the Lord says, stop it. But what's interesting here, what is it that's going on in her with the diet book? What's going on in him with the third marriage book? The University of Washington studied 2,000 couples for 20 years. They had a love laboratory, so to speak, and husbands, wives, and these things, and they videotaped. They had people monitored, heartbeats, beats per minute, BPMs. They were doing everything. They had linguists there, word choice. I mean, in-depth study of 2,000 couples for 20 years, and they said, we've now concluded what makes for successful marriage and what causes a marriage to fail. And it comes down to two ingredients, love and respect. Love and respect. When love and respect are present in the relationship, it doesn't have to be perfect, but there's a tone. In other words, it doesn't move into hostility and contempt, the antonyms of love and respect. It doesn't move into hostility and contempt or the appearance of hostility and contempt or the appearance that's saying, I don't really love you. I really don't respect you. Because when that's the message, and if that's even verbalized, I don't love you, I don't respect you, it's a killer. You can forget the money problems, the in-law problems, the health problems, the work problems, the schedule problems, the child discipline problems. All of those are real issues, but they're no longer the root issue. And when you're having a conversation where you come across in a way that you're basically sending the message when you're talking about money, I really hate you, woman, for the way you spend. And you have a look that says, I really don't like who you are, and no one could love you, you're going to kill her. And when he wants to be sexually intimate and you say, is that all you ever think about, you animal? You're sick. And you have contempt and disdain and disgust. You're killing him. But here's the deal. We do this innocently. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, most times, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, 33 and 34, the husband is concerned about how to please his wife, and the wife is concerned about how to please her husband. He penned Roman, the great treatise on depravity, the sinfulness, the selfishness of man. But in marriage, he said, no. Your spouse does not get up early in the ways to show you hostility and contempt. In fact, they're motivated in their deepest recesses to please you and show you that they're concerned. The problem is we do that in ways that the other really doesn't find as beneficial. Or they're certainly not trying to displease you or show you they don't care. They're actually trying to do things that they think are noble but end up offending us. And I'll explain that in just a minute. And so there's confusion. There's honest misunderstanding. But Paul says your spouse has basic goodwill. It doesn't mean that we have perfect goodwill, and it certainly doesn't mean we have good follow-through all the time. but that there isn't evil will. There's not evil intent. But if you're going to sit and say, my spouse has evil will, then that's your decision. Paul is saying your spouse has basic good consent. Now, if they betrayed you, there's adultery, that's different. I'm talking about gray area stuff. Gray area stuff. That the pink and blue differences in the gray area, though, must not be escalated to black and white moral issues. Because they're not. There's no thus saith the Lord on this. So how do we deal with these honest differences of opinion that matter to us? It's not that they don't matter. It's not that we have a value. It's not that one is right, that another person can never be wrong. But most of the time, it's that my decision may be better. It just makes theirs less better. It doesn't make their thought wrong. Why do we do this? It's just less better. It's what we call a comparative statement, not a qualitative judgment. But we don't do that. Mature people have not come to a point where they figure this out. It's not that you're wrong. It's just that I feel that my position has a greater insight, but I really do appreciate some of what you said. That's really brilliant on that part. But in the overall scheme, I really think I'm right, but I know you're right because you could be right. Why don't we put that language in there? But we don't. Instead, we escalate because we're equal, therefore we're the same. Because I know I'm right, you're wrong. Because I know I'm normal, you must be abnormal. And that's a great way to do relationships. Mature people. But what the University of Washington, in studying these 2000, said, we now know the two key ingredients. It's called love and respect. Love and respect. When that attitude of love and respect is present, but not only love and respect, in terms of both needing love and respect, they lean toward the woman. Here's the key now. Here's what I'm coming back to. This is the key. Listen to me. She leans toward the love side. He leans toward the respect side. She leans toward the love side. He leans toward the respect side. Now, does that mean she doesn't need R-E-S-P-E-C-T? She does. Does that mean he doesn't need love? He does. But if you need, in the area of intimacy, that your deepest need is for respect, not love, why is it there's not one movie in all of Hollywood at the end where the hero rescues the damsel and says, baby, I want to respect you the rest of my life? There's not one movie that way, and I say follow the money and you'll determine your true values, what you really believe apart from political correctness. 10th anniversary card, not one in all the Hallmark cards, they all know R-E-S-P-E-C-T, not one card from a husband on her 10th anniversary, baby, I really respect you. They've tried it. It doesn't sell. She doesn't want that card. Follow the money, follow the money. And by the way, R-E-S-P-E-C-T was written by Otis Redding, not by Aretha Franklin. It was a song to his wife, and then later on, the Soul Queen was coming along, and they shifted it so that she could sing it because of the rhythm. Gentlemen, we had one song, and they took it. They took it. But yes, she needs respect. And if you love her every day in the way that she needs to be loved, she'll feel respected. Or put it this way, if you keep disrespecting her, she'll say, how can you say you love me and treat me disrespectfully? She will land almost always on that. Are there going to be exceptions? Usually if there's woundedness, if she's not in love with her husband, but then that's an exception to the rule. Something's happened there. You're either having an affair, you just want civility in a relationship because you're having an affair, or your husband so wounded you because he's having an affair. Usually, if it's just civility and respect, there's woundedness in the female because she wants to love and receive love in a romantic, intimate way. Women are incurable romantics, and it's around love. Now, does he need love? Yes, but Shawnee Feldhahn, a good friend of mine, did this random sampling through decision analysts out of Houston, many questions of the American males. It was almost a perfect sampling, 400 American males. They were so blown away by the results, they did it again. But one of the questions was this: would you men rather be left alone and unloved in the world, or be viewed as inadequate and disrespected by everyone? Would you men rather be left alone and unloved in the world, or be viewed as inadequate and disrespected by everyone? Almost 75% of the American males said they'd rather be left alone and unloved in the world. We are very vulnerable when you send this message to us. I find you inadequate and I don't respect you because of it, especially because I feel unloved and alone. You'll lose his heart every time. And what's happened, though, the certain voices in the culture still tell us what that means, that men are narcissistic and egotistical because that's what they want rather than love. No. Have you not read? He who made them from the beginning made them male and female. Not wrong, just different. And when that diet book was handed to her, she heard a message: I don't love you unless you look like a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. And when that third marriage book was given to him, he heard, I find you inadequate and I don't respect you unless you become more loving like me in this relationship. You're the reason for our issues. That's what he heard. That's what she heard. And we can say all day long, they ought not to feel that way. Or do we want to say they ought to feel that way? It's the moral ought of philosophy. It's a great thing. If I'm the standard of humanity, then you ought to be like me. Oh, wait a minute. Your relationship won't work because God didn't hardwire your spouse the same way. There's a lot of crossover, but these distinctions are sufficient to create tension. And unless we understand that and give them the benefit of the doubt and realize she has a need that only I can meet and that she's vulnerable in an area that I'm not. He has a need that only I can meet and he's vulnerable in an area that I'm not. And once we come to that realization, even though there are going to be annoying, irritating times when they act offended by something I didn't intend to do, but once we come to that mature perspective, you know what? It's not necessarily always going to be happy moments, but there will be a basic friendship there because tomorrow I'm going to be vulnerable. And reciprocity kicks in, and you talk about two people who enjoy each other because they get it. I'm weak today, you're weak tomorrow. We'll serve each other. We got each other's back. I'm not going to judge you for your vulnerability. I feel badly that you think that I intended to send that message. I didn't. I apologize. Well, I didn't mean to do that because you didn't. But what I find fascinating is that the University of Washington also got gender specific because in this love laboratory, they realized that 85% of those who withdrew and stonewalled were the husbands. 85%. That's not the stereotype or pigeonhole the male. That's statistically significant. That's predictable. That's not the dude of randomness or chance. It's just not. It was 2,000 couples, 20 years, statistically significant that almost 85% of those who stonewall and withdraw during a marital conflict is the husband. They had them wired for heartbeats per minute, and they noticed the men's beat per minute were 99 beats per minute during this heated conflict. What is that? That's called warrior mode. And when a man is in that mode, he has to calm himself down. And he can look very stoic, but his heartbeats were just bursting in his chest. And he has to calm down. He has to disengage. He has to withdraw. He has to drop it. Forget it. You're picking a fight. She's not trying to pick a fight, but that's how it feels. Well, see, the very thing that you see there is what will happen. If someone has opened up fire here, your husband will throw himself on you and take the bullet and die, and you'd walk out. It's so instantaneous. Boom. That's why he says you're picking a fight when you're not. But physiologically, it feels that way to him. That's a design. It's a gift, but it can also be a curse. It's a gift, and he would die for you. In fact, one husband said, I love you so much, I would die for you. She said, oh, Harry, you keep saying that, but you never do. But that physiological response would protect you, but also during a conflict where he doesn't want to escalate this because he sees it as not a fight. This is no big deal. Drop is not the big, so he has to disengage. But the women were asked, when your husband withdraws like that, what do you feel? It feels like an act of hostility. Interesting. He hates me. He does not love me. See the leaning toward love? Hate, hostility. But every man that I've done research on, he does what he does because it's honorable. If I was best of friends with Pastor David, and we were, we're 18 or 19 years of age, and we get into some real argument about something, at a certain point, men they just are so frustrated, we want to fight. And we don't call it abuse. We just, we just kind of go at each other. But the relationship is more important than that physical dimension. So what we do is drop it, forget it, and we disengage because the relationship is more important than the issue, always. And it's honorable to say drop it, forget it, and exit. That's honorable. That's what we do. That's honorable. It's living by the honor code. Relationship is more important than this issue. I don't need to keep going at this. It'll just irritate me and provoke. So we disengage. So now the question on the table is this. When a husband withdraws and stonewalls, 85% of men do that, is it an act of hostility or an act of honor? The answer is yes. It just depends on whether you videotape in pink or blue. Whose lens do you want to look at it through? It feels like an act of hostility to every female. It feels like an act of honor for every man. And the women were saying they could not imagine shutting down over what they perceived to be a minor criticism. It was beyond their belief. So they saw their husband, what did I, hey, come back here. She couldn't imagine this. Beyond her imagination. This was a female thing because she does not resolve conflict by just dropping it and forgetting it. You talk it through, say, I'm sorry, seek forgiveness, hug, laugh again, and it's called the ocean of emotion they feel comfortable in, and it's what I call bringing things full circle. And they just expect that in all relationships. They do it with their sisters, they do it with their mother, they expect their husband's going to do it, and he just says, drop it halfway through, he's done. And she's just in shock. He must hate me. The researchers, interestingly, when the men were stoic, the women were coming at the man, fire, flamethrower. But her heartbeats were normal. Heartbeats were normal. Because she knew where she was headed with this, trying to connect and reconcile, seek forgiveness. She looked like she's out of control. She's not. He looks like he's under control. He's losing it. So each does what God hardwired them to do. But they also researched how women will approach. They will criticize, complain. There's 2,000 couples, 20 years. The linguists were there. This isn't politically correct, but you can't say it any other way. Women criticize, complain, criticize, complain, criticize, complain. The men were asked, what do you feel? It feels like she's using this topic as another opportunity to send me a message that she has contempt for who I am as a human being. She's disgusted with me. She doesn't like me. I can never be good enough. But all the research points out that women are nurturers, women are caregivers, off the charts. Whatever the social scale, women care. If you get sick, gentlemen, you'll be on 100 women's prayer groups. They will pray for you. They just can't not care. They will be praying for you. They just can't not do that. Within their nature, God designed them to nurture. They care. So why does she criticize? Why does she vent like this? Why does she confront? Because she cares. So it raises that question. Is it an act of contempt or is it an act of care? It just depends on whether you videotape in pink or blue. Could we actually come to a point where we say neither wrong, just different? But even here, can I ask you a question? Are you listening to this from the standpoint with the hope that your spouse is listening to what I'm saying? Or are you listening from the standpoint of what God is saying to you? And if you're looking at this from your own standpoint, even in this grid where you have, is it an act of hostility or an act of honor? Is it an act of contempt or is it an act of care? As a woman, are you saying, well, I'll take 2 out of the 4. I'm a caring person and he's hostile. And as a man, I'll take 2 out of those. I'm an honorable man and she's filled with contempt. Now, the answer is all 4 are true. You have to decide kind of the percentage. All 4 are true. Neither one of you are wrong. You're just different. And the real question on the table, is he really an honorable man? And he's not trying to be unloving because he would die for you. Is she really a caring person who isn't getting up early in the morning thinking of ways to diss you? But I saw something in Ephesians 5:33 that just blew me away. Ephesians 5 is the greatest treatise in the New Testament on marriage. And the summary verse is Ephesians 5:33, where God is in effect saying his last words to the church about marriage. And he says that a husband must love his wife and a wife must respect her husband. In the first part of that verse, no one really debates. The second part, women say, well, Dr. Emerson, I don't feel respect for him. It'd be hypocritical for me to show respect when I don't feel it. I know you don't want to be a hypocrite. He hasn't earned the respect, and everybody says you got to earn it and deserve it, and he hasn't earned it, nor does he deserve it. He's not superior to me, and that's the dictionary definition of respect. You show respect to your superiors. I'm not inferior to him. I'm not going to be treated like a doormat. I'm not going to feed the profile that I read about him. He's narcissistic. He's egotistical. I'm not going to give him, feed that. I'm certainly not going to give him license to do whatever he wants, come in with a cheerleading outfit and pom-poms, just say, go ahead and do whatever you want to show that I'm a dutiful wife and going to respect you. I really think, Emerson, you're up to male patriarchy, and that your secret agenda is return to male patriarchy. I'm not going to go along with that. I certainly am not going to set the feminist team back 50 years. I certainly am not going to subject myself to emotional abuse. But other than these things, I'm really open to hearing about what you have to say about that. How many of you have sons? Raise your hands. That mantra I went through is the attitude your sweet daughter-in-law is going to have toward your boy. And here's the deal. Only the husband is commanded to agape love. Why? Because God put it within the nature of a woman to love. She loves to love at the level of intimacy. You have to wound a woman to get her to stop loving. God designed you to love. He's not going to command you to love because he created you to love. Your sweet daughter-in-law will love. But when she feels unloved, she'll show him disrespect. And when a husband feels disrespected, he ends up reacting in ways that feel unloving. And this is where I meditated on Ephesians 5:33, that the crazy cycle exploded in my mind. God commands me to love Sarah, but what happens when she feels unloved? I'll bet she reacts in ways that feel disrespectful to me. And the Lord is saying, Sarah, I want you to put on respect because there are going to be moments where you feel unloved. It'd be very natural for you to show disrespect to Emerson, and it'll just put you on the crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts. And this thing spins out of control. And when the issue isn't the issue, this is the issue. In most cases. In most cases. And why is it that God commands a woman to put on respect? Because when she feels unloved, she reacts that way in disrespect. Why does God put man under the divine command to love? Because when he feels disrespected, it's very natural for him to react in ways that feel unloving to her. But here's what gets so confusing. She's not trying to be disrespectful. In most cases, she's feeling unloved, and she reacts this way. It's a default. The research has pointed out when she's upset and hurt, her eyes darken, face turns sour, hand on the hip, scolding finger, the sigh, the rolling of the eyes, head back. And when estrogen kicks in, the word choice of contempt is incredible. Disrespect just comes out. And when you feel disrespected as a man, it's very natural for you to react in ways that feel unloving. You get harsh, you get angry. And no woman is going to be sexually intimate with that. She's not hardwired to respond to that. She's very vulnerable. And a man is very vulnerable around gestures of contempt. It doesn't work. But what's so sad is you're, as a woman crying out for love, you're not trying to be disrespectful. He's crying out, do you believe in who I am? And respect means not respecting bad behavior. It means respectfully confronting bad behavior. It's your demeanor. It's unconditional positive regard toward the spirit of your husband while you're addressing issues that are not respectable. Every male leader is very clear. He confronts behavior that's not respectable, but he doesn't show contempt toward the spirit of the person. You women make a major mistake by your look. You look at him as though he's inadequate and you don't respect who he is because he's not loving, and he'll shut down on you every time. In the same way, you can't be harsh and angry with your wife and expect her to want sex with you. There are certain things that just will not work, and what's so sad is there's an honest misunderstanding because he's not trying to be unloving and she's not trying to be disrespectful. But when we feel unloved and disrespected, our default is to come across that way. So now my question to you is, do you want to know how to get off that crazy cycle? Anybody want to know how to get off the crazy cycle? About 4 people. I will tell you, let me tell you that Sarah and I are pink and blue, and we get on the crazy cycle every week at a little level. It's constant. So the question is, how do we jump off quicker? So how many would like to jump off quicker? Would you like me to tell you how to jump off quicker? Come back at 5, and I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you. But here's what I'm going to share with you. I'm going to help your spouse understand, as gentlemen, that you're not trying to be an unloving man. You would literally die for her. And Jesus Christ said, no greater love is a man than this, that he lay down his life for his friend, not write a Hallmark card. And you men are honorable men, and you're doing the honorable thing. And I'm going to help her understand that. In fact, you come home, she says something to you that's disrespectful. You try to do the respectful thing by trying to stay quiet. When you do, she tells you you're unloving, and you feel even more disrespected. I'm going to help her understand that. There are times he comes home and something happens, you feel unloved, you try to do the loving thing to move toward him, he tells you you're being disrespectful, and you feel even more unloved. I'm going to help each person understand your heart, because you're not intending to do what they think you're doing when you see their spirit deflate. Let's pray together. Lord Jesus, I believe 1 Corinthians 7:33 and 34, that a husband is concerned about how to please his wife. But we do that by trying to do the honorable thing, only to appear unloving at times. She seeks to please him because she's concerned. So she moves toward him because she loves him, only to appear disrespectful. Lord, we have noble virtues, and yet we end up not understanding why our spouse doesn't fully grasp that. And this afternoon, we're going to understand that. Through Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.